Hi everyone, Teddy Baldassarre here. In this video, I'm going to be doing a reaction to some of your watch collecting pet peeves. Things that could be included in this can be anything involving watch brands, designs, watches themselves, or just different collectors and philosophies out there in watch collecting. I just want to have this be an area where we can kind of vent out. I asked people on Instagram, what are some of your watch collecting pet peeves? And we amassed around 9 or 10 of them that I'm gonna go ahead and react to right now. Now, before we jump into this video, definitely check out the pre-owned section on teddybaldassarre.com. Getting new watches in every single week from some great brands from the likes of Tudor, Grand Seiko, Breitling, Nomos, Tag Heuer, and many others. Check it out now on teddybaldassarre.com. And also, if you're looking to move on from one of your watches, definitely check out the sell page, fill out the form, and one of my colleagues will be in touch if you're a good fit for a program. Buy and sell on teddybaldassarre.com. So now let's begin with our first pet peeve, and it looks like there were quite a few with a similar theme here, and it all really was around sizing. First one, 39.5mm case says, nothing annoying me more than large dials and cases. Never would have guessed somebody with that account name would have issues with larger dials and cases. Another one that I have here is the industry standard for 48 to 50mm lug to lug. Hey look, my watch has wings. All right, so one thing I will say, first, when talking about larger cases in general, I think a lot of people just get consumed, and I don't like this idea where if a watch doesn't work for me, then it just can't work for the market at large. People get so consumed at what works for them that they just forget that there are other people outside of what they want in a watch. And that's something I just, no matter what your preference is, I think we should just be a little bit more conscious about. In regards to just some cases being overly sized out compared to maybe what some people want. Now, I think we just have to keep in mind that brands are making watches for jewelers that are putting watches in their displays that are gonna catch the attention of somebody that's walking by that will eventually buy it. We are a type of consumer that are going to really look at every single new release, get really excited about things, and have particular dimension sets that work for us and don't work for us. So we are a particular group, not watch buyers everywhere, and it's hard to let our preferences lead the charge for a brand. One thing I will say when it comes to lug and just proportions, I think there are brands that don't think enough about this. You see this a lot with brand, maybe we'll be sizing something at around 40mm and the lug to lug is like 52mm. I think the fact that they don't include this type of information on their websites is probably an indicator that they don't put as much weight on something like this. I'm sure they care about it, of course, when they're designing the products, but when they omit this from their websites, it's sending a message to us as consumers that maybe it's not as much of an important factor for them as it is for us when we're making a buying decision. So all this in mind, yes, I think brands should just keep in mind what enthusiasts are saying, but also understand from our side that, of course, what we want is not going to be always what the market at large is going to want. Now for our number 2 pet peeve, too much text on a watch and a cluttered dial. So cluttered dial, I think it matters mostly around complication. If we're talking about like a Breitling Navitimer, maybe a perpetual calendar, I'm okay with there being some busyness because that is just going to come as a given as a byproduct of the complication itself. But excessive text, that is something I absolutely totally agree with. When you have all this extra text that doesn't really deliver anything as an end result, it's pointless. I think about it all the time, and I know I like to talk, and I'm always thinking about brevity in some of my content. When I initially started, I was all about making things snappy, quick on this channel. As I've just learned more about watches, I've now come to really have trouble with bringing things down and condensing things down more because you feel like you need to include everything because it's not a complete thought. But I think this aspect of really being to the point is important even when it comes to design. I always think of the quote, I have made this letter longer than usual only because I have not had the time to make it shorter. Basically meaning less can sometimes be more, and refinement and less text, I think in a design is in a way almost better. I look at like the Tudor Pelagos, you look at all the text on that dial, like self-winding, chronometer, certified, like all of these statements are redundant to me. And I think this is something that brands could be better about if you look across the industry. When is it text or indications that are actually helping the design? And when is it just trying to like lift up on a pedestal what this watch is capable of? Because I think people that really care are not going to, hey, it says it on the dial, that's something I need to look at. No, they're going to do a deep dive analysis. I'm sure they're doing it for a reason, but still, it just seems like it's not necessary. For pet peeve number 3, snobby watch lovers that assume what they like is what everyone should like. This almost goes back to point 1 where I discussed the idea of preferences of yourself should be the preferences for all. I think that's a short-sighted idea and people get so consumed in what they like that they think everyone should be about that. Talking about snobs, I think where most people think about snobs are when you're dealing with price. I don't like the gatekeeping mentality. This is for like every single type of like interest. Like I also have a channel about fragrances, which some of you guys might know now. I definitely check it out if you're into that type of world, but it's the same for any interest level. When you're first getting into something, you're more looking towards like the attainable end because you can't justify spending so much money on something. And then there are those people that are like, hey, you need to own this, or like they're like just saying and putting down some of those entry-level offerings just to make themselves feel better. If you have to put down somebody early on in their journey to make yourself feel better, I mean, I think we all know that that's a dumb, stupid idea. But also on the flip side, I think this whole idea of just snobs and everything like that, it's kind of funny too, because I always see like people like to also justify for people not liking something more expensive, that's like a fault. If people are going out of their way, they have expensive tastes and are saying everything of like this tier below is horrible, that's one thing. I think we all agree that that's horrible. But also attacking people that can afford nice things and say like, you do a video on like a Patek Philippe, Calatrava or something like high end, and then someone's like, oh, hey, my Seiko 5 can hack. You kind of have these like drive-bys of critiques that nobody asked for, and it's almost a way of justifying in the opposite direction. So yeah, just kind of venting out some ideas here, what I see on a daily basis, posting videos online. Now, number 4 here, we have on a serious note. I get annoyed when the date wheel is not color matched, or if it is the same color as the dial markings, but the shape placement throws off the symmetry of the dial. Now, I tend to agree. One thing I will say in general is there's a lot of, just based on sometimes the movements, brands just get caught up like, hey, a date's better than no date, which I would argue sometimes is not the case. I actually prefer in many instances, depending on the watch type, if you're dealing with something like a diver or like things like that, like maybe sometimes a date's helpful, but like an elegant dress watch, then you just feel like you have to include a date. Like sometimes it's just so off and just ruins the design. Symmetry as well. I've just come to appreciate like a 6 o'clock date and just thinking about keeping things balanced. The color matching, that's a big deal, but I think what is more of a big deal to me other than the color matching is just how refined is the aperture of the date window. Have you ever seen like a poorly cut out date window or like a date window that like just is like have this very stark cutoff and it doesn't transition well? I think you would either want to do like a rounded off style and like it kind of fuses well with the date window underneath. It maybe has a frame, whether printed or with a steel outline. All of this I think helps with really breaking that down. Symmetry, one thing, I'm all for symmetry on a dial. I think when you're talking about elegant timepieces, it always helps and just is nice to the eye. That's more of a preference, but still just for myself, I agree. And then when you're dealing with date windows, color matching, sure, still have to consider legibility, but I think the main thing that bugs me about date windows is when they're just kind of lazily just put together. I'm more worried about the transition from the dial to the date window, not as much color, just really kind of that frame outline, and is it kind of a cohesive collaboration between those two elements. Number 5, 19 millimeters and 20 millimeter straps. It's so annoying we have all these loads of 20 millimeter straps, and it's annoying that we have to waste money buying them in odd sizes. So this was something that bothered me for a while. One thing I will say, just in defending these styles and also the odd number lugs, sometimes proportions really dictate what the width is there. If a brand is doing this in like an insidious manner and like are thinking about how can we get people to buy our straps, I don't think that's a good idea, but sometimes you almost have to kind of fall in between there on the proportions. I think the proportions mean more with those lugs than jumping it up and making them larger that could throw off the entire design. I will say that the odd number lug width thing bugs me more when the bracelet and factory strap is terrible to begin with. This is horrible in affordable watches, but if it comes with a nice bracelet, for example, and I don't really feel the need to switch it out as much, I'm easier to let that one slide. If it comes with a nice factory applied strap or attachment, I don't really find this as big of a deal because I typically will just keep it on the factory bracelet or strap. It's really an issue with things like the Orient Bambino where you're looking at, hey, like I'm just starting to get my watch collection in order, and then I have 21 millimeters for the lug width. That bugs me more because you're getting started out, you're trying to like build your collection, you haven't put as much money into this, and you also aren't getting a great factory end result. That I think is where it bugs me more. I will also say that if you have more of a supple calfskin strap, sometimes you can squeeze that in from an odd number lug width. It's all kind of case by case depending on the strap as well as the lugs and what's going to allow that to work, but that's also something to try maybe before starting to invest in different straps. If you can make that work, it's not so jarring, it's not right on the nose of being between like a 19 to 21, maybe it's like a 19 and a half, which sometimes is the case even though it's proposed as a true 19. try things out before just giving up on it and getting mad. I think that's one other thing I would consider here and add. Number 6, when a complication cuts off part of a numeral. I can't stand when you can see half of a 6. It would just be better just to remove it. Can't unsee. See, this does not bother me as much as some people. I'm actually okay with this. I will say though that some brands, it doesn't bother me as much when it's just a small amount that's being cut off. Like that seems natural. But there's like those examples like where most of it is being cut off and there's just a small little element that is actually showing of like the numeral, say like it's 6 or 12 for like a chronograph register. How I would think about doing it if I'm a manufacturer is like, hey, how can I make those registers larger? I'm always cool with larger registers as long as it doesn't take away from the central dial surface. I actually like a small sub-seconds, for example. Like I think that's like classic, just watchmaking at play there. So you almost have to just make that call for yourself. Like for my own personal preference, I don't mind it as much, but there are some where I just question like, why didn't you just make the subdial bigger? Why didn't you go ahead and just remove it completely just so you can have that line be walked in a more thoughtful manner? But if you think about it, it kind of does make sense why they're doing this as well. It's more of a preference thing. I don't really have much to add here. This is kind of like, I love it, I can tolerate it, or I just can't deal with it. There's really no logical type of conclusion to come for this because I think you could make a case for both. It really is just a preference thing. So I don't even know how to really react to that fully. Next up, we have making limited edition watches only to re-release them again in just a few years. I know it'll give those who didn't get the first one another chance, but for some dedicated collectors, it can be quite annoying. Now, I'm not familiar with a brand that does this frequently from a main watchmaking perspective. I think brands are pretty true to this. If like a complete one-to-one bringing back a limited edition, complete copied, maybe there's some changes in it I've seen where it's very minor and that could maybe make some people mad, but I'm not really familiar. Maybe there's some like micros that are doing that. And if that's the case, I don't think that's a good thing to do. Like if you're setting yourself up for getting a limited product, that's part of the selling proposition of why you want to buy it. It's exclusive. Not everybody can get it. Once it's gone, it's gone. That's why they were able to leverage selling it to you. So I don't think they should come around years later and just be like, hey, just kidding. Now anybody else can actually get that watch. So I'm not a fan of that practice, but I'm also not familiar with many brands that are doing that. I really actually can't even think of an example off the cuff here. If somebody wants to jog my memory here, feel free in the comments. I will say though, transparency around limited editions in general, I think could be better. People just want to know how many are actually being made, how are they being allocated, is it a limited edition or is it not? Is it an exclusive boutique edition? Like just having transparency around production, I think across the entire industry would be better. This is just something that now with all the question marks of allocation with brands like a Rolex, brands could really separate themselves by doing a better job here. I look at like the Omega Silver Snoopy 50th anniversary, like people for a long time were questioning, hey, is it limited? And Omega will say, no, it's not. And then it's, hey, I can't get one. What's the deal with this? These type of situations I think can be avoided if brands are just very forthcoming about what is actually going on. People will still line up to buy it. And I think it's all about expectation. So much about just customer experience and just honestly consuming any product is all about expectation. If I was given expectations that could not be met at the beginning versus somebody that really told me the honest truth at the beginning, even if the same end result is achieved at the end, I'm gonna have completely different perceptions of how that was gone about. So this is certainly something that brands could improve. Next up, we have something that Tudor and Longines really are good at doing is offering models in various sizes. Other big brands could follow that example. So I agree with this. I think generally we talked about the idea of sizing, and I think a better thing that brands could just do is like, hey, how could I answer to both the crowds and offer up something that everybody could enjoy? Instead of trying to hit the sweet spot, maybe just offer 2 different sizing options. Brands like an Oris, a Tudor, a Longines, like you mentioned, I think are very good at this, but also keep in mind that these are brands that have a lot of dollars to put behind designs, number one. Oris as a brand is going to be one that's going to be very in tune with what enthusiasts want because they operate more independently than other brands out there. And it is a risk. When a brand is developing product, if you're trying to get a product around $2,000 and you're trying to make as many as you can, or at least a select amount, you're talking hundreds of units at the bare minimum, if not thousands. Think about the capital cost that's going to be associated with making that and then having to do that with multiple sizes, multiple dial colors. There's a reason why brands don't just do that every time, because if they swing and miss on a design, they have double the amount of watches that they're now laying in that they have to just deal with and find a way to get rid of, or just, I don't even know what they end up doing. It just depreciates the value of the brand when you make too much product. So I think it really comes down to, yes, it's a great idea, I would love to do it, but it comes down to capital and the risk that is associated with going and taking that big swing. And then for our final pet peeve here, hate it when big watch companies make it so hard and unintuitive to navigate and look for watches on their websites. Most watch companies definitely need to invest more in UI and UX design. Now, one thing I will say about brands in general, and I've learned this now kind of navigating as an authorized dealer, not to say that my site is like the greatest site out there, it definitely could be improved, but I will say that most brands are not set up as e-commerce companies. They are not looking at their websites as a shopping experience. It's more of like a giant billboard. And that, as an end result, creates a difficulty of navigating and trying to find watches to like purchase through their store. But in addition, even to find information on the product, it's hard. Like certain brands, like just navigating, finding their collection where you can actually look at all the pieces, getting to the product page. Sometimes there's like over animation where they're trying to make it more complex than it needs to. I want snappy load times. I want to see things quick as possible. But brands get really caught up in having this image of like how they can reflect this type of imagery that they want in their store online, which when you're dealing with an online space, the types of things that you think that would work in a traditional retail environment are not going to be the same things that work on an online environment. And that's not a compromise of your brand. It's just knowing the platform that you are trying to operate in and being effective at it. I think of like a place like AP, like some of their website to navigate, even though they're not selling and they don't really need to optimize their e-commerce just platform today. You go on that site and it's just like, oh my gosh, like all the loading and all the just kind of meandering around you have to do to really get to the final end result of maybe the information you're looking for. It's tiring. And that's something that from a more affordable perspective where you're going to convert on e-commerce, like I think of a brand like an Oris that their website is very hard to navigate given like all the models that they create. And that comes back to bite them because you're going into all these collections and it's hard to really just navigate where you're going and trying to find that specific reference and just see all the watches available. But I totally agree. The user experience for many websites and watches and brands, including my own, could be better. But for a lot of the brands, I think one thing that really you have to consider is just what is the intended purpose of their site and what are they trying to navigate? Many of them are not seeing it as a point of sale. They're seeing it more as a way of casting this nice image across the internet and trying to extend what they're doing in their boutique to online. But knowing the online landscape of how people navigate the internet, this is just never going to work the same way. It doesn't compromise your brand. You're just optimizing it for how those type of consumers want to experience the brand in that way. So that's just one thing I think we all have to keep in context. Like the brands are just not there compared to a lot of other sites that you're going on a day-to-day basis. But all right, guys, that is my take on some of your pet peeves. I think there are way more. I was not able to go through all of them. I think the post that we asked on Instagram had like hundreds of comments. So these are just 9 that were picked out. And I wanted to kind of give my take on some of your takes. If you guys enjoyed these style of videos, please give it a thumbs up. That's a great indicator for me that you want to see more of these style in the future. I'd be happy to do another one of these pet peeve videos because I think there are more things in watches that will grind our gears quite a bit. Also, be sure to subscribe, hit that bell icon as well to stay up to date with future content. Be sure to check out TeddyBaldassarre.com, full authorized dealer of 30 brands, quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support, and a full factory warranty for all the new products. And check out our pre-owned section with new products coming in every single week. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.